I'm Patrick Reed. I used to be a member of the Ontario Legislature last century. Liberal Labour, actually, for those of you who are political. It's interesting, none of you, like your leaders, mentioned the big elephant in the room, the provincial debt and deficit, and how you're going to deal with that and do all these other wonderful things without raising taxes higher, which we're all concerned about, but in fact spending less money somewhere to deal with the debt, because the more debt you have, the more interest you're paying on it, and the less money there is for health care and all these other good things. So that's number one. Why was this, was there some kind of deal made between the three leaders not to discuss this matter? And secondly, a peripheral question, we had less than 50% vote this time, and it's been going down and going down. So none of you, no three parties, should be very happy with the outcome when less than half the people bothered to vote. I'd like to hear the views on that one too.
Joe, you want
to? Yeah, well, I was actually going to speak to the turnout, the percentage of turnout on one of the responses from Yasir, because I think what we, I think Yasir was saying earlier, people voted because of this issue, that issue. I think people weren't engaged in this campaign. I went knocking on a whole bunch of doors, as other candidates do, and there was a hodgepodge of issues on the door. There was no one real issue. I would say the HST mildly, but there was not one real issue. And I think people were somewhat voter fatigued. They'd gone through municipal, they went through a federal, oh my God, here we go again, and people were not engaged. And I think the other thing is that no one party, including mine or the Liberals or the Conservatives, really excited and got people thinking, oh my God, here's another alternative. As far as a clear alternative, I think there was some minor victories for us and some minor victories for the Conservatives, but nobody really excited the voter to a great deal. So I'm greatly concerned about the participation. We were down below 50% for the first time, and I think that is really dangerous in a democracy. And I think we need to figure out, what do we need to do to overcome that? Now, to the elephant in the room, some elephant. I'm gonna say something, and I'm sure somebody's going to go writing about it in the media tomorrow. Yeah, there is a deficit, but we shouldn't get spooked by it. And I think that's what both the federal government and provincial governments have been saying this time around. I was part of a government in 1990 where everybody was freaked over the deficit just because it was the first time we'd ever encountered something like that. And I think what we've learned from that experience, all of the political parties, is that these cycles come and these cycles go, and we need to manage our way through them in a way that makes sense for the vote for our citizens out there, that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So there will be deficit over a period of time. There will be debt. The question is, it's not necessarily in my mind what we need to cut as far as services. I think it comes down to how could we better deliver services. There's a lot of money to be saved if we decided in our larger expenditure areas such as healthcare and education, social services, to deliver services in a way that are smarter, that would be able to save us a whack of money. And the other thing is, and we talked about this in the last election, is that the whole issue of tax cuts. I'll use the United States as the example. The Americans have a huge debt problem. And the big debt problem is that they basically change their tax code to where it's you and I that pay the most of the taxes, and industry and the rich pay very little taxes. And so no wonder they've got a problem. And one of the things that we tried to talk about in this election is that are corporate tax cuts really the way? Do they create jobs, and is that smart fiscally? And I would argue no. I think you can use tax cuts as a tool to create employment, but I think you've got to be very targeted about how you do it. And if the government was to heed one point that we made in this election, which is reverse the tax cuts that are about to happen and only give them to those who are really going to create.
Hence all the wedge issues. I mean, people call wedge issues, I call them, these are emotional levers, which parties try, right? If you can get people excited about some emotional issue, be it on human rights or faith-based education or homophobia or anti-homophobia, that people may churn up and come out and vote. There are all these different strategies, and I think that's something we just have to be very vigilant about and work on. And I, for one, will be very interested in working and finding ways. I think the other big challenge is that, and we're all guilty of this, that we went from a 30-second soundbite world to a 140-character world of communicating. If your message does not fit in a tweet, you don't have a message. And that's not how to have a debate. And mind you, I mean, I was for hours and hours amused, you know, following Jason and Warren Kinsella go at each other's throat during the whole campaign, and it was hilarious at times. But I mean, that's not political debate. That's not, no, with all due respect, Jason, it was great entertainment for us all political wonks, you know, and saying, oh my God, I can't believe he said that and he said that. But real people are not following that. But I think there's that spiraling effect that's taking place. And again, we're just not guilty, is everybody. I mean, I think our journalists spend more time tweeting about Dalton Biggity wearing a Lululemon jacket, and you know, here's Hudak with this opening song, and these are not real issues. Seriously, I mean, there's bigger things like the debt and the deficit that we need to deal with, which is an important issue, sir. And I think this is another great opportunity for all three political parties to say, look, we need to work together. We need to deal with this particular issue. We are not alone in Ontario. The whole world seems to be going through this. I ascribe to partly what Gilles is saying, but not 100%. I think we should be concerned about it, but it is a cyclical thing as well. One thing we saw consensus on, I think the only thing we saw consensus on in this political election, is that all three parties said same timeline to eliminate the deficit. Everybody sort of made the same calculation as to how we're going to do it. You have to have a prudent approach. Services in the end of the day for people are number one.